Welcome to our journey into the arcades of April 1979, a time when neon lights glowed, coins clinked, and, well, every game told a story. Take a seat and let's dive back into an era when video games were a shared adventure. Our mission today is really to pull out the most fascinating insights from the sources you've provided, giving you a kind of shortcut to understanding the vibrant, sometimes chaotic world of arcade gaming back then. We'll be looking at the big names like Taito, Namco, Nintendo, Sega, Bally, and their competitors, exploring the industry's surprising trends, and sharing some pretty colorful anecdotes, all straight from the news reports of that specific moment in time.
Yeah, this deep dive, it reveals so much more than just game releases.
Yeah.
It shows an industry really in flux, grappling with defining intellectual property, fending off imitators, innovating super fast, and even kind of wrestling with its burgeoning societal role. It's a unique glimpse into the very foundation of what would become this global entertainment powerhouse we see today.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the undisputed champion of the arcade in April 1979, Taito's Space Invaders. I mean, it wasn't just a hit. It was so dominant that our sources actually call the phenomena invader heat almost like a fever, right?
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating here is the legal battle that erupted almost immediately. Taito wasn't just, riding the wave, they were fighting hard to protect their creation. They filed what are known as provisional injunctions, essentially temporary court orders, against companies like World Vending and Fuji Korum. They asserted their original copyright over games like World Invader and Fuji Star Invader, and, well, they view this not merely as a financial issue, but almost a moral imperative to eradicate copy products from the industry. This reveals a really early and strong stance on intellectual property, even in such a nascent industry.
A strong stance indeed, but given the sheer scale of that copy problem you mentioned, how effective was their defense, really? It sounds like they needed to manage demand while also, protecting their brand.
Oh, they absolutely did. Beyond the legal action, Taito also actively pursued a proactive licensing strategy. In Japan, they granted manufacturing licenses to quite a few companies, including Sammy Industry, Logitech, New Japan AKK Jatol, and even IBM Japan, interestingly enough. And crucially, in the United States, Midway held the exclusive license. So this dual approach, aggressive defense and strategic expansion, was a really crucial step in formalizing how IP would be handled in the industry going forward. However, our sources also highlight that despite this, a significant problem persisted with these underground products circulating without proper authorization. It just shows how challenging it was to control IP in that kind of Wild West environment.
Right, the Wild West. And here's where the human element of Invader Heat gets really interesting, I think. The game's influence, it just extended way beyond the arcades, didn't it? It permeated daily life. There's this intriguing anecdote from Nagoya about invader sickness, where people were reportedly so immersed in the game that they began mistaking the distinct sounds of pedestrian crosswalk signals for invader sound effects. What does that invader sickness tell us about the unprecedented psychological impact games were already having, even back then?
That anecdote, yeah, it truly brings home the immersive power of these early games.
Yeah.
It signals that video games, unlike pretty much anything before them, could deeply alter perception and become almost an unconscious part of people's thought processes. It really foreshadowed the deep engagement and sometimes, let's be honest, obsession we see in gaming today, where virtual worlds can kind of spill over into our real ones.
Fascinating. As powerful as Invader Heat was, though, it wasn't the only story in town, was it? How were other Japanese powerhouses like Namco and Nintendo responding to this whole phenomenon? Were they simply chasing the invaders' craze, or were they maybe charting entirely new courses?
Well, Namco, surprisingly, seemed to be hedging their bets a bit, not just chasing invaders' clones. They were clearly diversifying across genres and player experiences. For instance, their popular GB TV arcade game was now also available as a tabletop version, which made it more accessible for different locations. They also rolled out Submarine, the pinball game Space Slider, and the shooting game Shoot Away alongside Super Breakout. But what truly stands out, I think, is their focus on younger players with things like Shaman X and the impressive Locomotion series of large trailer kiddie rides. These weren't just simple toys. They were designed to give a pretty realistic driving experience with authentic sounds and motion. It shows an early recognition that the market needed broader entertainment beyond just intense arcade action.
That's a brilliant point about diversification, yeah, and targeting different demographics. So while Namco is branching out, what about Nintendo? How are they carving out their own niche in this rapidly expanding landscape?
Nintendo's strategy was also Well, pretty fascinating. While they did release Space Fever, which was an invader-like game, it offered three distinct play variations. That shows an immediate iteration on popular mechanics, not just a straight copy. But then they also brought Block Fever, a block game with moving elements, and perhaps most notably, Max 4 and 1. This was a single TV block game that actually allowed players to choose from four different game modes. This whole concept of offering multiple games within one machine for the player, it was an early form of value add and player choice that was pretty forward-thinking for 1979.
Yeah.
It indicated a focus on replayability and customization long before it became standard.
So we're seeing this push for variety and player choice, definitely not just cloning. What other innovative features were emerging from companies beyond these big names? What was driving the industry forward?
Yeah, the broader trend of innovation across the industry was really striking. You had Data East releasing Space Fighter 2, an Invader UFO game, but it boasted a new lever action designed for smoother player control, a small but, significant ergonomic innovation. Alpax rolled out Old Invaders II, which was a block-type game but with a unique Corn Belt theme, showing a willingness to experiment with visual design, which is kind of cool. And Senritsu introduced Space Strangers, a space war game with truly unique enemy behavior patterns, hinting at more complex AI, which was a pretty big deal for the time.
And IBM Japan, a name you might not immediately associate with arcades, right? But they were quite a dark horse. Their PT series really stands out for its sheer diversity.
Absolutely. IBM Japan's PT series really highlights how varied the arcade market was becoming, beyond just the usual space shooters people think of. I mean, from a PT Mahjong game to a humorous PT Nine-Koro Seesaw game, a color PT IPM Invaders, PT GT Challenger, PT New Block, and PT Stardust, they were like dabbling in everything.
Yeah.
This suggested the games were already breaking out of narrow genres, aiming to appeal to different tastes and potentially even older or more casual demographics.
Yeah.
It really foreshadowed the casual gaming market we see today.
And we're also seeing more immersive experiences starting to emerge, even in those early days.
That's right. Tasco, for instance, brought in some unique kiddie rides like Harley XX and Space Love 4. They use these things called road monitors and realistic motion to provide a true driving sensation for kids. Pretty advanced. They also launched Pin Pon Pan, which was an arcade game but with a medal payout system based on specific winning conditions, introducing a completely different reward mechanism. And Kansai Seiki Saisaiku shows The Driver, that also offered a sophisticated driving simulation, complete with on-screen visuals and dynamic sound effects. These examples show an industry already experimenting with deeper immersion and different types of player interaction.
Okay, so broadening our scope now, the international arcade scene, especially with U.S. companies, was equally bustling, wasn't it? It highlights how interconnected this industry already was.
Oh, definitely. What's fascinating here is Bally Midway's significant role, particularly in pinball. Their Playboy pinball machine, for example, was reportedly directly influenced by Hugh Hefner's personal enthusiasm for the game. That shows these unique collaborations between entertainment moguls and game design already happening. Bally also held a key patent for microprocessor-based electronic pinball, which they showed off with their Fireball home pinball machine. And they were actively engaged in patent infringement lawsuits against four other pinball manufacturers. So these IP battles weren't just happening with video games, they were defining the entire amusement machine landscape. They even offered pinball machine rental services and had released Bally Invaders as their fourth version of the popular game, clearly capitalizing on that Invader heat.
Right, milking it for all it was worth. And this is where the industry starts to get truly interconnected, isn't it? You mentioned this trend of convergence between the traditional entertainment industry like film studios and game manufacturing. So studios like Warner Communications, Columbia Pictures, and Gulf and Western, which owned Paramount Pictures, were forming these capital ties, basically investing in or partnering with game companies like Atari, Gottlieb, and Sega Enterprises.
Yeah, this is a really crucial development. Atari's Superman pinball, tied directly to the Blockbuster movie, was a prime example. It was one of the first pinball machines to move its score display up to the back glass, indicating a shift towards more visually sophisticated designs that integrated with the intellectual property they were leveraging. This early intertwining of Hollywood and gaming really laid the groundwork for today's massive cross-media franchises. It started right back then.
And space-themed TV games were clearly a burgeoning genre beyond just Invaders itself. What were some of the other notable entries in this expanding universe of electronic space combat we were seeing?
Well, you had titles like Atari's Starship and Orbit, Gremlin's Blast, Vectrabeam's Space War, Cinematronic Space Wars, and Exidy's Starfire. They were all contributing to this expanding universe. The sheer volume indicates that while Space Invaders definitely dominated, developers were rapidly exploring variations and enhancements within that popular space shooter genre, trying to capture their own slice of the market.
Absolutely. And the globalizing nature of the industry is seen so clearly in the AMOA, the Amusement and Music Operators Association, report. Their membership grew by a solid 9% year on year, reaching over 1,200 members by March 1979. That kind of growth really speaks volumes about the industry's health at the time.
It really does. And what stands out is how this growth wasn't just domestic U.S. growth. Illinois, with 110 companies, had actually surpassed New York, which had 96 in U.S. membership, showing a kind of geographical spread. And importantly, Japan also had a significant international presence within AMA, with 10 member companies listed, including IBM Japan, Apollo, Amusement Press, Sega Enterprises, Namco, and Taito through its Taito America subsidiary. This truly shows how quickly the arcade business was becoming a global phenomenon, laying down these international networks that would only grow stronger over time.
And within this rapidly growing, globalizing industry, there are also significant leadership changes and personnel movements shaping its future.
Indeed. We see Paul Jacob, who was the former president of Midway, moving over to join Vectrobeam as its new president. That kind of high-level talent migration is pretty common in rapidly expanding sectors, right? And sadly, the passing of Nathan Gottlieb, who was a co-founder of Gottlieb, marked the end of an era for one of the industry's true pioneers. These shifts just highlight the dynamic and evolving leadership landscape as the industry was starting to mature.
Okay, so as arcades boomed and game innovations kept coming, the industry also began to grapple with its own rapid expansion. This led to growing calls for regulation and, interestingly, internal discussions about its future. It signals a kind of shift from pure, unbridled growth towards maybe self-reflection.
That's a crucial observation, yeah. The All Japan Amusement Operators Association, known as Zenkoku Yukio, was actively discussing legal regulations specifically for TV game machines. And this was often done by contrasting them with the existing regulations for pachinko parlors, which were much stricter. They had restrictions on operating hours, age limits for entry, even food and drink sales. None of that really applied to general TV game operations at the time. The Hokuriku 3 prefectures specifically proposed that TV game operations should be regulated under the Amusement Business Control Law, just like pachinko.
So what were the core concerns driving this push for regulation? It sounds like there was a real societal worry brewing about this new form of entertainment.
There definitely was. Concerns were being raised that because TD game machines were basically unregulated, they could operate without time limits, allow unrestricted entry for minors, which, raised serious concerns about juvenile delinquency, and even permit food and drink sales right there on the premises. The implication was they could become these uncontrolled gathering spots. There was also this perceived unfairness in amusement tax application. Pachinko machines were taxed, but TV game machines largely weren't, creating an uneven playing field that the traditional amusement industry understandably found pretty unfair.
And this issue wasn't just theoretical, right? Our sources show real-world implications, with police actually getting involved.
Absolutely. Police crackdowns in Tokyo during February 1979 resulted in 124 incidents and 160 arrests for things like habitual gambling and violations of the Amusement Business Control Law. So this wasn't just some abstract policy debate. It was a visible manifestation of the pressing need for clearer regulations and a response to actual problems emerging from this unregulated growth.
And it wasn't just external pressure pushing for change. The industry itself was seeking to mature in some ways. Even the metal game sector, which was facing a decline because of the rise of TV games, was actively working towards its proper development. They were looking for guidelines for operating metal game centers, emphasizing safe and responsible practices amidst this shifting market. It really shows a desire for self-governance, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They understood that to maintain legitimacy and ensure long-term viability, they probably needed to set their own standards, especially as the landscape shifted so dramatically towards TV games. It was definitely a proactive move towards defining best practices.
Okay, to really bring this deep dive home, let's zoom right in on a specific microcosm of this whole arcade revolution, the city of Nagoya. Our sources give us a really fascinating look at how local arcades there were adapting to the invader heat in April 1979.
Right, Nagoya. First, there's Casino de Ronde. Now, while they were committed to their traditional casino style, they strategically opened a special TV game corner. And this corner was uniquely outfitted, not just with any Space Invaders, but specifically with Taito's color Space Invaders. This highlights a really clever blending of old and new entertainment, integrating the hot new trend without totally abandoning their established identity.
Then we have Carnival Plaza, which was a sister store to Casino Royale. This place adopted a pretty clever two-floor model. The first floor was dedicated entirely to TV games, while the second featured a game cafe and bar, also equipped with additional TV machines. This shows an early attempt at segmenting the customer base maybe and creating different social environments around gaming.
And then there's Casino F1, which had a close collaboration with Taito. They made a really bold move. They completely removed their metal games to focus exclusively on invaders. The manager apparently highlighted a player known as Mr. Invader, who could famously play for over 4 hours on a single game. That emphasizes the immense value of extended gameplay for customers and just the power of a highly addictive game. They were also planning to double their floor space, clearly seeing the exponential growth potential there.
And other places adapted too, right? Time 2000, located across from Uni, was designed to be approachable and comfortable, consciously avoiding overly aggressive decor. This made it a popular spot for more casual play, showing a focus on user experience, which is interesting. And the game corner at Fuji Bowling Center was reportedly thriving, capitalizing on both the bowling revival and the invader craze, demonstrating how arcades could actually boost existing entertainment venues.
But, it wasn't all smooth sailing, even for the leaders. Even prominent game centers like Casino Rio faced significant challenges. Despite being a leading player, its manager described the invader heat as an abnormal situation, leading to fierce, almost cutthroat competition. They were struggling with the decline of metal games and perceived a lack of new, exciting TV games beyond invaders to drive sustained interest. It really highlights the double-edged sword of having a single dominant hit like that.
Wow. So what does this all really mean for you, our listener, reflecting on this pivotal moment in arcade history?
Well, April 1979 was far more than just flashing lights and beeping sounds, wasn't it? It was this crucible where the entertainment industry wrestled with explosive growth, the very definition of intellectual property, the challenge of fending off imitators, and the imperative to innovate rapidly with new technologies. It also sparked these intense debates about its social impact and the need for thoughtful regulation. It's really a snapshot of a business trying to mature while still being swept up in a massive phenomenon. It reveals that many of the core challenges and opportunities we see in tech and entertainment today are deeply rooted in these early experiences.
Looking back, it's just so clear that the foundations for today's multi-billion-dollar gaming industry were laid right there in those coin-operated machines, driven by fierce competition, surprising creativity, and just a constant quest for what's next. It really proves that even a single game could reshape an entire cultural landscape.
Absolutely. And this makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many of the challenges and opportunities faced by the arcade industry back in 1979, from copyright disputes to public perception and the need for regulation, are still mirrored in today's rapidly evolving digital entertainment landscape? Perhaps with new technology, sure, but with very similar underlying dynamics.